St. Louis, it feels good to take on the Edmonton Oilers with both teams having 93 points. Let's get into it. Blues.
Hey, this is Brandon Chen.
Subscribe to Locked On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That's Haley Simon, the host of Locked On Blues. And we want to thank everyone that's making our show their first listen of the day. Both shows are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Haley, there's an awful lot to get to. We only have 30 minutes. Let's try and keep it under an hour, unlike the last time I went on your show. And what was supposed to be 10 minutes turned into 35. So we're going to do our best to be on time and not get too tangential in our conversations here. So let's say I've been in a coma for the first 6.5 months of the NHL season, and you had to explain to me how the Blues got to where they are right now. What are the key points I would need to know and understand?
Well, Nick, it has been a lot for the Blues that have happened, especially in the past 6 months or so. So first I would tell you is getting the new coach. The Blues got Jim Montgomery, who was the head coach of the Boston Bruins, who the Bruins ended up firing, which was a bad decision. And the Blues got rid of Coach Drew Bannister. So that was the first thing. Another thing that the St. Louis Blues did was the wonderful offer sheets for Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg of the Edmonton Oilers then. And they have been outstanding, especially Dylan Holloway. And another thing that the St. Louis Blues did, again, thank you, Doug Armstrong, GM of the Blues, was get Cam Fowler from the Anaheim Ducks, who's been a staple on this Blues' defense. So those, for me, are my top 3 Blues moves that have happened this season.
And then one more point quickly on that. Aside from bringing Montgomery in, and Montgomery has a reputation of being a really good defensive coach, that was a real staple of the Bruins over the last handful of seasons. What would you say drove the turnaround that's propelled them to the best record in the NHL since the Four Nations face-off break?
So that's a good question. And that's something that I debate all the time on Locked On Blues, because I say that it could be various things. One, I think Jordan Binnington playing in the Four Nations faceoff gave him this boost of confidence. We see how Binnington thrives in high leverage situations. So again, getting all the starts in the Four Nation faceoff, I think really just motivated him. And again, I look at a player exactly Bolduc, that was a corny joke. But during the Four Nations faceoff break, instead of going on vacation like the other guys did, he actually played for the AHL affiliate team, the Springfield Thunderbirds, and he got some games in. And that really boosted his momentum. And I think for a team as it is, they made no moves at the trade deadline, and they stood pat for a second year in a row. And they knew that there's 2 options. One, you tank, which they're not going to do. Or 2, they rally to try to make it to the playoffs, and they have a general manager in Doug Armstrong who knew that this team could do it. So I think just having the confidence from Coach Montgomery, from Doug Armstrong, and even just the team themselves. I mean, Binnington won in the Four Nations faceoff for Team Canada and played a great game at TD Garden again. And I think that also gave the team all this momentum. So yeah, there's a lot of things, Nick, that I could go on and on about, and I could talk a little bit too much about it because I'm very excited, but definitely a huge turnaround after the break.
And it's really interesting because we talk about this all the time, both as media people and as fans. But if you feel like you have the opportunity to get a better coach in season, it feels like more teams need to look at this reality. The other one that comes to mind was a number of years ago when the Canadiens fired Michel Therrien and they hired Claude Julien the day the Bruins had fired Claude Julien, very similar circumstances. And it feels like if you have the opportunity to make that type of streamlined decision where objectively the guy we can get is better. If it's, marginal, we're talking about 2 coaches who are very similar, I don't think it's as much of a conversation. But Drew Bannister, not a ton of NHL experience on a team that kind of felt rudderless. And Montgomery, when you have that defense first coach and you think about it, not just in terms of the Blues. The Kings over the last 2 seasons have manufactured wins through a defense-first, goaltending-oriented way, in a very similar way to the Blues have. When I had gone on Locked On Blues a few weeks ago, the thing that jumped out at me at looking at the underlying numbers over the last month and change was that the Blues are playing elite defense. They're controlling the high-danger chances and the expected goals. And so even if they don't necessarily have as much depth as some of the other teams on paper, they've manufactured enough through good structure, discipline, and sometimes that's enough, especially when you look at the state of the Western Conference, when teams like Vancouver have underperformed their expectations, when teams like the Predators have underperformed their expectations. Sometimes all it takes is just being in the right place at the right time, and the Blues have capitalized massively.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the Blues' biggest struggle and biggest downfall was their defense. And again, the penalty kill, not so great for the Blues, still isn't so great. But I think when you do have a defensive first coach, things will change and turn around. And again, that's why I gave a huge shout out to Cam Fowler, Ryan Suter even. I know Ryan Suter has been all over the Central Division, but you do have these older players that have stepped up big time, but also a guy like a Tyler Tucker, who really bounced between the T-Birds and then the Blues last season. So again, he deserved that extension. I mean, Nick, total transparency. The Blues are missing their best defensive player in Colton Parayko, and if they're able to play the defense that they are right now, this team is going to be very dangerous when it comes to playoff time because he will be expected to be back. So that is going to be a huge piece of this Blues team.
Speaking of injuries, we can't talk about the Oilers without talking about the MASH unit that is currently their team. Last night, they played, I will say, okay against the Ducks. They outshot them more than 2-1. They lost 3-2. Right now, they are missing McDavid, Draisaitl, Ekholm, Klingberg, and Stuart Skinner, and Trent Frederick, who played his first 7 minutes as an Oiler and then left that game, didn't return, and is out at least for another week. And I was talking about this with one of my friends the other day, and he had asked me very candidly, he said, do you think the Oilers going as far as they did in the playoffs last year kind of doomed them in terms of just the accumulation? Because you're playing till June 24th and you get July, August, and that's it, because you're back in season by basically the second week of September. And it's hard not to feel like that. The Oilers have played a lot of playoff games over the last handful of years, and their older players are dealing with nagging injuries, and you play with a nagging injury, you risk re-aggravating it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I actually am curious what you think about what's going to happen with this Edmonton team once the playoffs come along. Listen, I can go back and forth with you, Nick, and kind of pick on the Oilers. But at the end of the day, this is still a very competitive team with a lot of depth. No, you're gonna say that. But despite the injuries, because I've been watching some Edmonton hockey, it's not like they're so out of it. So again, do you think these guys are going to come back healthy-ish? Keyword ish, enough for the playoffs? Or do you think it's going to be just, hey, too many injuries, let's focus on next season?
I think Connor and Leon are good enough where they can drag them through a first round series against the Kings. They did it 2 years ago where Leon had the high ankle sprain and he had the most goals of anybody in the playoffs in the first round in that series that went 6 games. So I think as far as making a little bit of noise, that's not out of the question, but a meaningful run, especially with the way the path looks, where you're probably going to play LA round 1, Vegas round 2, and then whoever comes out of that knife fight in the Central in the conference final, that's a really uphill battle that I don't think this Oilers team is particularly suited for. And look, you never count out a team that has McDavid and Draisaitl, but right now, with them both injured, their best defensive defenseman injured, it's really hard to see a world where they can make this happen. As of right now, of course, we still got a week of regular season games left. Ideally, you want to get those guys in a game or two before the playoffs start to kind of ramp them back up, get them up to game speed. But we'll see. I mean, they've kind of been banking on we'll figure it out when we get there all season. And now it's about to be time to figure out whether they're actually good or not.
Right. Now, that's a good point. I think that's one thing I talked on yesterday's episode on Locked On Blues about that, about how I am upset that there is no McDavid or Draisaitl or Skinner, because those are the type of guys I love playing against as a fan because of how talented they are. So it is frustrating, I think, just taking the bias away for me being a Blues fan. It is frustrating not being able to see a generational talent as in Connor McDavid, and knowing that Edmonton could potentially be a first-round exit, it's a little bit disappointing.
And you want to be able to rub it in and say, well, we beat Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. I understand the way the sports fan brain works is interesting in that, like, yes, you want to win, but you also want to be able to win in a way that you can kind of rib someone for it even more. And we're going to take our first break of today's episode. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about how Dylan Holloway, because Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg have fitted in St. Louis, how Dylan Holloway has done such a nice job in getting a larger role. We'll visit Kasperi Kapanen, because that's been an interesting conversation over the last few weeks in Edmonton, what his role would be on a playoff team when the lineup's fully healthy, and a whole lot more on this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. So be sure to stick around. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein today with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Personally, big fan of the no shell variety. They're the perfect grab and go snack for when I'm here at my desk working on the show, or if I need a quick protein boost to hit my macros for the day, they're a great go-to. Or if you're old school and you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachio is a complete protein that provides all 9 essential amino acids. So get cracking and get snacking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone that is hanging out with Haley and I on this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. And I was talking about this with one of my friends the other day because the Blues game was on at the bar over the weekend, and he had brought up, he goes, isn't Dylan Holloway really good now? And I was like, he's always been good. It's just he only played 11 minutes a game on the Oilers. So you get to put that feather in your cap that you identified a good player and said he just needs more opportunity. And that's one of the real, I don't want to say shortcuts, but that's a real inefficiency in the market. If you can identify a player who just needs more ice and they can make more of an impact, and the Blues did that twofold.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Holloway, Hollywood Holloway has been absolutely phenomenal for the Blues. 26 goals, 37 assists, 63 points, plus 21. And it's funny because I said this on an episode of Locked On Blues. I was actually talking about how I felt like on Edmonton, Dylan Holloway was never going to be utilized the way that the Blues could utilize him. And this is something that Holloway even said when he did his first presser here as a Blue, that with Edmonton, essentially, and I'm just paraphrasing, there's a lot of good veteran talent, a lot of older players that deserve to be a top 6 forward. And there's no denying that whatsoever. I'm not coming on here, Nick, and saying that any of those guys don't deserve it. I'm talking about when the roster is healthy. However, with Dylan Holloway, he had an opportunity in St. Louis to be a top 6 forward, playing on the first line, the second line, and even at one point he was on the third line. But every single time Dylan Holloway skated on the ice, he showed you what he is, and that is a star in the making. He has been one of the most vital players for the Blues' offense besides Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou. And I know Holloway, he's been out for a couple games, day-to-day situation with Holloway. And again, the Blues miss him. In last night's loss to the Winnipeg Jets, the Blues missed him. And I think that is the main focus here, Nick, is that, yes, Philip Broberg, a little overpaid, no denying that. Holloway deserved every single cent, and I'm hoping that the Blues give him an extension. Edmonton had a chance. They really did, to have him grow, and they developed him beautifully. So thank you to the Oilers organization for that, for the development. However, I feel like this was just such a win for the Blues.
I mean, when you go and look just at the ice time, I mean, he's playing 5 more minutes a game as a Blue this year than he was as an Oiler. And he got run with Draisaitl in the playoffs last year. But the fact he only played, 50-something regular season games last year on a team that really used his speed. And that's something that I think the Oilers desperately miss. If you go look at the NHL's data tracking, you look at the NHL edge stats, this is an elite skater, somebody who's in the 95th percentile of speed bursts over 20 miles an hour, which is what they classify as elite speed. So that straight line, just get him the puck, break out, and get to offense. The Oilers, as a team, miss that so much from him. They miss that from Warren Fogle and Ryan McLeod, who's on the Sabres now, and it's fundamentally changed how they play hockey. The Oilers have, my entire conscious memory, the Oilers have been a transition speed skill team, dating back to when it was Taylor Hall, when it was Ales Hemsky, when it was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and that was the Oilers' big three. They were always trying to make plays in transition with their speed, and now they're a cycle team. They're a get the puck in deep, go to work on the forecheck, other than when McDavid's out there, other than that. But for the most part, they're a cycle team now. It's why they couldn't score against the Ducks last night. They spent the entire game in the Duck zone and circling the offensive zone around the perimeter, couldn't get the puck in tight around the goalie. And those shots from 35, 40 feet out, that's the reason the Oilers' shooting percentage as a team is down across the board. And so many veterans like Hyman, Nugent-Hopkins, Henrique, I could go on and on, are all having down years statistically. They're not generating as dangerous of offense. And it's a hard way to live. It's legitimately harder work. You think about if you're on the cycle, you need to string together 5, 6, 7, 8 passes in a row just to get one chance. You compare that with get the puck to Dylan Holloway and let him skate in a straight line, and he doesn't only has to receive one pass. It's a lot easier.
One-timer Holloway. No, it's great. I love hearing you talk about this. But I am curious, though, because when the Blues first acquired Holloway and Broberg, I got a lot of Edmonton people commenting on my videos saying they're overpaid, they're not that great. Now that time has passed, and especially Dylan Holloway, more so less than Philip Broberg, how do you feel like, because you know this fan base, obviously, with Edmonton, how do you feel like they're reacting to seeing Dylan Holloway having all the success in St. Louis?
I think there's a lot of people who watch my show pretty regularly who say they would rather have him than Jeff Skinner or Arvidsson. And, if that was the binary choice, knowing what you know in hindsight now, I think most people would agree, because it's twofold. Number one, Holloway's younger. He still has a capacity to get better than he is right now. And Jeff Skinner's not having a bad year, even though he's been healthy scratched at times because of his defense, or they didn't feel like there was a spot for him in the lineup because they didn't want to play him on the fourth line. He's still like 6th on the team in goals. He's got 15 goals. And for somebody who's been healthy scratched at times, pretty decent output. I think, and this is something I was talking about on the show on Locked On Oilers last week, as far as like making the case for the Oilers that they could make something magical happen in spite of how rough the last month has been. If you want to talk yourself into the Oilers overcoming their circumstances, you need something to break your way. And generally when we talk about that, we talk about teams playing above their weight class, punching above their weight. Those are typically the younger teams. If you wanted to say that about like the Canadiens or the Devils even, I think you could talk me into a world of these are young guys, they haven't been there before, they have the capacity to play at a really high level. Whereas the Oilers, this is a very defined team. They don't really have young guys who have the capacity to maybe break through to a higher level. For the most part, the Oilers are what they are.
Right. And I think that's a good point to make, because I think looking at Edmonton, and I compare the Blues a lot, because the Blues do have some older players, established players, I would like to say. I mean, we have a guy in his 40s. But when you look at Edmonton, I think for me, the one thing that I have a really hard time understanding and processing is that they were okay allowing 2 guys that were drafted in the first round in 2 respective years, 2019 and 2020, to go away. Guys that they developed, guys that actually played really good hockey in the playoffs. I watched, obviously, all the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, and they looked great. So for me, especially Dylan Holloway. So for me, I have a really difficult time understanding what Edmonton's end goal is, right? Because McDavid, I know he's still relatively young, because I forgot how young he actually is, because he carries himself in such an older way. But you have guys who are going to be getting older, and they're not able to play the way they have been. So I get kind of confused, I think, time to time, Nick, I'm going to be honest with you, with how Edmonton was able just to allow these guys to go away and not even keep one of them. And that we talked about that. We even said maybe there's a potential for one of the guys to stay in Edmonton, but they didn't do that. So I don't really know what their plan is because, again, some of these older players, is Corey Perry still playing with?
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
he's like fourth on the team in goals.
Corey Perry.
I'm not. Corey Perry has, I want to say, 16 goals. Corey Perry has 16 goals. He has the same amount of goals as Jeff Skinner does.
Wow.
They both have 16, and that's tied for fifth on the team.
Fifth on, oh my goodness. Yeah, not so good of a season then for Edmonton. All right. Well, on that, I have nothing else to say about, I'm not going to comment, actually.
All right, we're going to take our second and final break on today's show. When we come back, we'll set the tone, talking a little bit about the playoffs, what expectations are, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around.
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the #1 recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential, but not anymore. Thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Haley and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. And when we talked early in the season, right at the start of the year, October, November, whatever it was, we both were kind of in agreement that the Blues were in no man's land. They were trying to figure out what they were going to be. And very much by virtue of their work, of the work of guys on the team, they played themselves into a playoff spot. And when you have this type of house money feel to it, you kind of start to talk yourself into, well, if they did it in 2019, all it takes is a couple weird bounces, and we're right there. I mean, that's what you said to me a few weeks ago when I had come on Locked On Blues, and it's part of the fun. You know, I was talking to one of my Canadiens fan friends the other day, and she was saying, we play Washington in the first round. We absolutely can beat Washington. And if we can beat Washington, we can beat anyone in the East. And that's how you really start to talk yourself into this. And it's not out of the question. We see weird upsets in the NHL.
Okay. I am not going to lie. I've been on this show saying I am not going to say it feels like 2019 because I didn't want to actually believe. And now that I can say the Blues have a 96.5% chance of making the playoffs, according to Money Puck, I feel like it's 2019 again. This is the most excited I have ever been watching Blues hockey in years. It has been horrible the past couple of years, not going to the playoffs and just watching all these other teams succeed. And how about for my captain, Braden Shen, to be able to finally go to the playoffs as Blues captain. But here's the thing, Nick. Anything can happen. Nobody expected the St. Louis Blues to come out of this break playing great hockey. And we see patterns, and I love patterns. I'm a big pattern person. I like to compare and contrast. 2018, 2019, fire their coach, hire Berube. 2024, 2025, fire their coach, hire Coach Montgomery. Ooh, also in oh my gosh, I'm so excited I'm getting 2018, 2019, 11-game winning streak, making franchise history. 2024, 2025, 12-game win streak, making franchise history. The St. Louis Blues at the beginning of this year, so I'm talking January, February, were a bottom 7 team. I came on Locked On Blues and I made a whole episode saying it's over. And I put my hands up in defeat. It was over. You know, nothing can happen. I was watching the Four Nations face-off. This is the best it's ever going to get for Colton Parayko and Jordan Binnington this season. We're going to the playoffs, and it's so exciting for me. Now, do I think the Blues are going to hoist Ward Stanley? No. I'm going to be real. No. And why is that, you might ask? Please ask.
Why is that, Haley?
I'm glad that you asked. I am afraid of the Vegas Golden Knights, and there is still a possibility that the Blues could play them. I would rather play Winnipeg. I know for a fact, because we beat Winnipeg this season. Don't shake your head no, because with a healthy Colton Parayko, Dylan Holloway, and a Jordan Binnington in net, because they had Joel Hofer last night, the Blues could have not easily, but they could have beat them, okay? The Vegas Golden Knights, I can't stand them. I think I can speak for everybody when I say that. I can't stand them. The one good thing about the Golden Knights at one point was Marc-Andre Fleury, and they got rid of him, and now they were the most hated team. I'm surprised Mark Stone isn't on LTIR. However, I am nervous about the Golden Knights. They make me nervous. But I think if the Blues get past that, right? Let's go say they play Vegas and they win. They can beat anybody. I really believe that. We've seen crazier things happen. As long as the Canadian team doesn't win the Stanley Cup. No, I'm joking. Because I still am hoping the best for Berube, but yay!
No.
Playoff in St. Louis again. Woo!
Yes.
Q Gloria.
It was a special time. That Blues team, that was a magical feeling. And when you're able, what'd you say?
With Pat Maroon.
Yes, of course, with Pat Maroon.
Story. Nick, you don't want me to get into this because then we're going to go over 30 minutes. But that team, the other day I was watching a documentary on that team, and I'm a crier, and I was crying because it was just so special. And it took me back to the moment when the Blues won the Cup, and I was sitting at home with my family, and I lost it. It was one of the best days. So I think for me, I can't get a little too ahead of myself because I have been experiencing nothing but championships in my own life. Right? We don't have a football team here in St. Louis. So the football team that I do like won a Super Bowl. And now the team that I am a fan of in hockey has the chance to go on to win the Stanley Cup.
It's a fun feeling. It is a fun feeling. And the one thing I'll tie it to, speaking of the Eagles, that nobody believes in us mentality is really powerful for athletes as far as locking in and getting focused. The Eagles wearing the dog masks, the underdog thing, the nobody believes in us. The Blues kind of did the same thing in 2019. The nobody believes in us. We're going to drag ourselves off the floor. Coming from dead last to winning the Stanley Cup is kind of the ultimate nobody believes in us. Vegas did it the first year they were a team. The nobody believes in us all the way to the Cup final. Florida 2 years ago when they lost to Vegas, when they got into the playoffs on the second to last day of the season and then went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. They won 4 games in overtime on their way to the Stanley Cup final. You start believing. You get that team of destiny feeling. I mean, hell, the Oilers kind of had that feeling last year when they were in that Vancouver series and they were down 3-1 and they went to Calvin Pickard, and Calvin Pickard bought them time. They got back in that series. They eventually won in 7. They outplayed Dallas, and they were 1 goal away from pulling off the greatest comeback in the history of professional sports. If any team is capable of just turning that switch on, you have to believe it's a team with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But this year, something has been off all year. And even when they were on that great run of form from the end of November through the end of January, it was never the most convincing. It was never the most blowing teams out of the water. It was a lot of holding on for dear life. It was a lot of multi-goal comebacks. And it's just hard to make a living that way. You want to try and find that middle ground so you're not too high and not too low. And the Oilers have been only high and only low this year. I mean, they only have 12 wins since the end of January, and it's April. That's kind of a problem.
And we had 12 straight wins, not to brag.
Yes, you did. And that's what I'm talking about. All it takes is one little run. And we haven't even brought him up yet or talked about him. And I feel bad because last time I talked to you, you were talking about him. But Robert Thomas had maybe the best March of anybody in the entire NHL.
Well, when you introduced Robert Thomas, I would appreciate if you said the 3rd star of the NHL this past week.
Okay, I hadn't seen that. I'm sorry.
You can do that again.
3rd star of the NHL for the week, Robert Thomas, yes.
Oh, my boy, Robert Thomas. Over 50 plus assists this season. Robert Thomas is something special. I said it once and I'll say it again. Robert Thomas is the heart. He is the soul of the St. Louis Blues, the best playmaker on the team, the best hockey IQ on the team. Even in last night's loss against Winnipeg, he won the faceoff and took a one-timer. Now it did go a little bit high and wide, which, again, it happens, right? But he's just so smart and so quick with it. And again, when Robert Thomas was injured in the beginning of the season, that's when I panicked because any player on the Blues could get injured and I would be like, okay, they can work around it. When Robert Thomas was out, the Blues sucked. They sucked. And there was no coming back from that. So again, when you talk about your most valuable player on a team, it's going to be Robert Thomas for the Blues, like it's going to be McDavid for Edmonton. And I think that for the Blues to have a guy like Robert Thomas who is still young, only 25, and still is growing each and every season, you're in a really good situation. He's the future captain of this team. Like, I can't even tell you. He is an elite player. He's a 1C. He would have made Team Canada if it wasn't for his injury. And people, Nick, they like to disrespect him. He's okay. He's good. He's not excellent. He is excellent. Robert Thomas is excellent. You're telling me that if Robert Thomas is not an excellent player who has over 50 plus assists on this season, who's consistently done that, by the way, throughout his time in the NHL, he's a cup winner, which is something nobody. No,
Corey Perry. Don't disrespect Corey Perry. Corey Perry won a cup with the Ducks when George Bush was president.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that. I was going to say nobody that you're really defending, and I was going to say McDavid and Draisaitl.
No.
But hey, Robert Thomas hoisted Lord Stanley his rookie season. I'm just saying that if you have somebody that knows what it takes to win, it is my boy Robert Thomas. And again, Nick, I'm sorry. I know that he's no Connor McDavid, and I can respect that. I can. But
he's upper echelon. He's upper echelon.
He's special.
I would say, I wouldn't say special. Special, the cutoff is 5 guys. Special is like, there's only a handful of them. I would say special.
I'm not talking like generational talent. I'm saying for the Blues, he is special.
Yeah, he's the Blues' most important player, but if we're talking about the macro, the NHL at large,
Obviously, Ovechkin, Crosby. I'm not
saying you're stupid. I'm saying we're having 2 different conversations. I'm saying I say special.
A Blues conversation.
Yes, and that's the
Blues, yeah, nobody on the Blues is special when it's the bigger picture. Binnington?
Nah, Binnington's a good big game player. It's a consideration. I don't know. I was rattling through my head. I was thinking maybe could I make an argument for Kyrou or Buchnevich or not really. Like Robert Thomas is cool.
Jordan Kyrou is more special than Robert Thomas?
No, I was just rattling through the lineup in my brain to think about, am I forgetting anyone? That's all. I wanted to be fair. You don't have to go through every single person. I was just trying to rattle it off quickly for the purposes of the conversation. The last thing we should talk about before we get out of here, based on where the standings are at right now and what it looks like, what would you say your confidence level is in this team as far as playing Vegas in round 1?
I mean, let's hope there's not a sweep, and I'm not talking about us. No, I think that this could go to maybe like 5 or 6 games. I think Vegas could win. My confidence level, though, I think the Blues are going to still play hard. They're going to still do some great things. Obviously, Vegas just has a better team. But in the beginning of the season, it's crazy how fast the season goes by the way. I was thinking about it. I believe it was like the second week into the season off the top of my head. The Golden Knights won. However, the Blues did take them, I believe, to overtime. And they played good hockey. So I feel like the Blues, they really play up or play down to their opponent. And that's something that I talk about a lot with this Blues team. So I guess I'm going to be confident in my boys. Win, lose, defend the Blues, 70%.
The one last thing I will say before we wrap up and call this an episode. I've been saying Vegas is the best team in the West since like January. And as much as the Jets and the Stars have had better regular seasons, I have seen the Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup. I have seen Jack Eichel be the best player in the playoffs and the best player on Team USA in the Four Nations. Vegas terrifies me.
Yep. Oh, and absolutely. That is why I said my confidence level in terms of confidence as the Blues are going to play hard and tough hockey. I'm not going to come on here and say the Blues are better than the Golden Knights. I'm not going to do that. And
I don't think anyone is better than the Golden Knights in the West.
No. And they would be, if the Locked On Jets guy, he beef with him right now, but he doesn't even know it. But if he were to come on and say that the Jets are better than the VGK, I would call bluff. I think that there is a point where you can be a fan, you can be excited, but you also can accept the reality.
Of course.
And I feel like I'm somebody that has followed the Golden Knights since day one. The original Misfits. Like, I love everything that Vegas had when they first came to the league because they knew how to do this extension properly. And they really did take full advantage of all the opportunities better than Seattle did. So I think that they built a dynasty in Vegas, and you never, ever, ever can count the Golden Knights out.
And that's the thing, man.
Hold on. One thing. If there's one team that I don't want winning the cup, it is the Vegas Golden Knights.
I'm trying to think if there's any team winning the cup that would like actually upset me. Like Vegas has already done it. Vegas has already done it, so I'm kind of numb to it at this point. I don't think like any of the Canadian teams don't really bother me.
Would you be happy if the Maple Leafs won?
It'd be funny if the Maple Leafs won more than anything after all of this. After all the theatrics and the dramatics of the last decade of Maple Leafs hockey, if they actually broke through and won, it'd be really funny if they did. And if there were ever a year, there's only two good teams in the East. It's not going to take a whole lot to break right for them. And if they can avoid playing one of the two Florida teams until the second round, that would help. But we're at the yeah. All right, we're at the 35-minute mark. That is plenty of Oilers. We didn't go to an hour today, which is good. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the shows wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Thank you so much for making our shows your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On NHL, covering the biggest stories around the league with the local expertise of Locked On. I will talk to you guys real soon. And Haley, I owe an episode because I said if the Blues made the playoffs, I would go on Locked On Blues. So if you're on the Locked On Blues feed, you will be seeing my face relatively soon. See you guys then.